Hello, everyone. I will give the lecture, the tiny desk presentation on Kinesics today. Here we are talking about our nonverbal communication, and we're on body movements and gestures and posture, and we call that all Kinesics. Kinesics is basically the study of motion, body motion, and body behavior. And we really want to apply it, as since we're in a communication class, to our social experience in shared spaces, and our social experience in interpersonal conversations. So we have these kind of two different ways that we're experiencing motion. I think we're really unique. Humans can move in really unique ways. I mean, we can go for a walk, or we can run and we can go at different speeds. We crawl. We can swim. We can jump. I mean, wow, there's a lot of different ways that humans move, and there's a lot of variety. And we love it so much that if you watch America's Got Talent or any of the kind of competition shows, from the Olympics to Dancing with the Stars, you see that we love to engage in watching movement as well, especially when we can join it in person, which is why concert experiences or sporting events are so popular, because there's something really engaging for us to be in shared public spaces with others who are moving in ways that are similar, or we're seeing them do things that are surprising and engaging. And so there's just lots of reasons why we love those. Remember, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, belonging is so important, right? We want to belong. That is part of our experience. However, we don't always pay attention to our movements. It's a skill unto itself to have body awareness. And so it's innately unconscious, our body movements and our motion behaviors. And if we did try to just pay attention to our motions, we would have a hard time focusing on other things. Maybe that's why it's so difficult to look at yourself while you're doing a tiny desk presentation. And with the videos I'm asking you to submit for class, because we aren't used to seeing ourselves in motion. That takes a different mental capacity, as compared to when we are just focused on a conversation and the other. So let's talk about kinesics. Kinesics is so important, and it's one of my favorite nonverbal channels to talk about. I like this channel um, because I think it really because it's so unconscious, and it's really interesting to bring it forth into the light a little and create some awareness. I'm sorry if you'll be walking around like this, like, what am I doing with my body? That starts happening when you take nonverbal communication. You get kind of self-aware. So Edward T. Hall, our anthropologist, remember we've been studying Edward T. Hall. It's actually in his other book, Beyond Culture, that he talks a lot about body movement and kinesics. So I'm just going to talk about his research from a cultural standpoint. Uh, what Edward T. Hall was really coming into his research during a time when technology was starting to become more of an essential tool to understanding the people. Of course, the Gottmans and the Gottman Institute really took it to another level when they started understanding the masters and disasters of relationships and conflict management. So the Gottmans really, because they could start hooking up heart rate monitors and things like that. But Edward T. Hall was using film and really understanding like how we can slow down film, look at frame by frame the movements of people, and he really was interested in the technology, like how many frames per second are to watch something, or that we're filming something so that we can get very detailed understanding of motion. So, and there was other people that were starting to use this as well, bird whistles, observation of people, uh, to show the choreographical kind of nature of how we move together in groups when we share space. And that's what we do. We unconsciously, this is all happening very unconsciously, but when we're in different environments, we all will match the movements of the that is coming from the environment. It might be coming from the music or the soundscape that's developed. It comes from the other people and the motions that they're taking. So the difference of the feeling of walking through a museum, and or is it an interactive museum like OMSI with a lot of kids, or is it like a science museum for those of you who aren't go to OMSI, uh, or is it like a national museum or a modern art museum? Each one is going to have these kind of different rhythms that to the space, as opposed to sporting events and concerts, right? Or grocery stores or outdoor markets like farmer markets. These all have their own kind of rhythm. And when we join those spaces, we unconsciously start to match the rhythm of the strangers around us. Wow, is that a thing? I challenge you to do an experiment and report back in class next week. Take some headphones, or if you have some AirPods, and here it is, take your playlist and get that synced up. And then put yourself in a place where you can see as much of, have much view, has the largest view you can have of a space. So like a grocery store that has two levels. There's a Fred Meyer's in my town that has a balcony and you can look down, sit up there at a like a coffee shop and look down and watch the shoppers. That's a wonderful space to do this experiment, or get bundled up if it's at a winter market right now or a summer market, and sit and watch that space, or, think about where you could do this. And then start going through your playlist and trying different songs and watching the rhythm and movement of the people until you find the song that no matter where you look at, everyone seems to match your song, almost like it's choreographed, almost like they can hear which song you've chosen and they are purposefully matching their music to your music, but that's not, of course, what's happening. Uh, so go ahead and give that a try. Tell me how it goes and what happens. Maybe you can write about it in your weekly worksheet. Edward T. Hall did this with a student, one of his students, uh, took a frame by frame film of a playground of kids. The kids come spilling out onto the playground. Some are playing over here, some are over here. They're all playing. Some are skip roping and playing ball, and or swings and jungle gyms, hopscotch. All these different activities are happening, and they're all with different groups. But they notice that even with the kids, there's one girl who is moving much rapidly. When they took the film back and they started slowing it down frame by frame, they realized there's one girl who was like almost going everywhere. And she had a very different rhythm as everyone else. And that means that what starts happening is she almost becomes a contagion to the group, and all the kids on the playground start moving to the same rhythm. And to test this out, they had a musician come and take the film and figure out the tempo of the kids on the playground, and then they composed a piece of music to go with the film. This is after in the lab with his students. And then they tried to show it to people. Even the principal of the school was confused on why are all the kids moving to the same rhythm to this music? Was it because they could hear the music, or had they been trained had they all been choreographed into it? There's different people had different theories to try and understand why this was happening, because it all looks like random groups of kids, yet they all match the music. So Edward T. Hall did that experiment with his students. So you can do this kind of more informal version of it on your own as an anecdotal kind of moment for you to really become aware. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're just trying to become aware of all the ways that we are communicating with each other. And nonverbals are so often unconscious that how we're communicating beyond words is woven into the culture, our fabrics culture. One way to think about it as a cultural phenomenon is like at sporting events. From one team to the other, they often have their own rituals, like football games have the touchdown or the down cheer, whatever it is, the music might play a specific set of notes for the first down, and everybody knows the movement and they become synchronized together in that movement. So we do it in these kind of ritualized ways too. Uh, and it's also one of the reasons why we we expect people to move in synchronized. And when people don't, they are often become uh, kind of like it's almost like when someone can't move in the same rhythm as the group, something highlights them and they will feel like they're being divergent. The group may not accept them because of they're feeling the divergence of the movement. And this is a good time to address ability and different abilities or different age groups that walk differently or move differently than other groups. And it might be, I mean, we could put all these hypotheses and test them if we were in a master's program and we wanted to run an experiment for it. But we could think about often the alienating feeling of being different in the way that you move, whether you're in a wheelchair or if you're on crutches or if you are an amputee. These things become almost social obstacles that are unconscious, and why we want to pay special attention to how we include people with different movement abilities. And even though our unconscious brain is trying to create all synchronized movement, we want to figure out how to create awareness to be more inclusive. Dun, dun, dun. Luckily, we're living in a time that is a little more open to that discussion and is, and hopefully we're only getting better at that. And whenever we see spaces that don't have access or are not inclusive, we find ways to become aware and adapt and change so that we can get better and better at that. But I do think it's important to recognize that it creates a cognitive dissonance, not just cognitive dissonance for the person who can't, uh, because of physical limitation, match the movement of the bigger group, and that we need to find ways to really pay attention to that and be more explicit about how they can be welcome into the space. But we can, I'd be curious what you think of that, and we can talk more about that as well. But I think that's a really important thing to highlight. Because this synchronicity, this rhythm and movement is so essential. And like I said, it's not just the way we walk or dance in a concert, it's also the way we breathe. And breathing can become synchronized as well. It's one of the reasons when I teach conflict management, I usually bring up something about breath and how to stay emotionally regulated so the conflict doesn't escalate. Because if someone is in a movements that are escalating the conflict, it's really hard to maintain your own emotional balance in someone's escalating feelings where they've lost the ability to be aware of what they're doing, either with breath or with volume, all those nonverbals. So I'm a big fan of zombie movies. And just another example in this are our zombie movies. Oh, the way that we synchronize. Usually in all our zombie shows, we have some scene that is going to highlight that to be safe, we must converge in our movements, in our body movements. Uh, any Zombieland fans out there? I'm a big Zombieland fan. One of the things we learn about Bill Murray in Zombieland is Bill Murray playing Bill Murray in the movie. I love that kind of meta stuff. The way he's survived and has gotten by is he has an uncanny ability to act like a zombie, and he can get himself around and survive, right? And then, oh, I have so many examples. Warm Bodies with the beautiful Nicholas Hoult. When he's playing R, he has to get Julie through the crowds. And even though he's a zombie and safe, to get her through, he gets her to walk and move like a zombie. So he's trying to convince her of that body awareness. Walking Dead with Michonne, her special superpower skill is how she understands her body and motion and can move through a crowd of zombies. And that's what happens to Rick and Glenn in season 1 when they want to leave the department store in downtown Atlanta. Of course, they smear their bodies with corpses so they smell like a dead body, but then of course they have to do the body movement. And then my last example is Shaun of the Dead. Any Shaun of the Dead fans out there? Any Sean Pegg fans? Guilty as charged. One of my favorites. The way Diane teaches the group how to walk like a zombie to get through the crowd, to get to the Winchester. It's a pretty funny scene. All of these I find just delightful as a communication instructor because it reminds me of Edward T. Hall's work on synchronized nonverbals. So that's kind of what I really want you to take that home with you. Really think about it in a new way, how we share space and public spaces, and that need to belong, that need to be socially accepted. I mean, this is a pan-human experience, but the truth is, a lot of animals survive this way is by acting like one. A flock of birds, a school of fish, a herd of antelope. We've seen enough of those kind of planet Earth videos to see the way animals mimic and synchronize their movements as a survival technique. It's happening for us too. If you really try to become aware of it, like the zombies, like, oh, I'm going to walk like a zombie, that is so difficult. It is so difficult. Which is those people who are dance majors or have done any athletics. There is so much practice to be in a place where you have to become aware of your movements and then get so habituated into it that you can do it at faster speeds. Just think about any of you, any examples where you had to practice and practice and practice uh, over and over again. And usually there's some type of observer or director, or maybe you've been in situations where uh, because we video so many things where you've had to watch yourself on video as a way to learn what you were doing with your movements so you can become self-aware. There is types of meditation where it's movement meditation, and that's that mindfulness to become aware of your own body and to be deliberate with the choice of your movement. That takes so much patience. Like maybe you could do it for 10 seconds, but could you do it for 10 minutes? Where for 10 minutes, your whole mind is on your breath and how you're taking even just one step and then another step. Or if you've ever, like maybe there's something you make, like a sandwich or a peanut butter jelly sandwich, something like that. Could you make the whole sandwich in this mindful slow motion where you are now thinking about how you are spreading the peanut butter, where are you setting down the knife and letting go of it? Like if you could do a whole mini activity where you are that deliberate, that is the first steps of how to have body awareness. Because there's a lot of things like I was talking about how your environment impacts our movement, but we have our own neuro activities that are affecting our movements. We have our breath, and what is the other thing that is kind of, not kind of, but is impacting oh, then of course there's I talked about this, the mechanical pieces of our muscles and joints, and if we have any limitations. So there's like the mind, the mechanical piece, and that's from Moshe Feldendricus. I'm just mutilated that poor man's name. I'm so sorry. Please excuse me. If you want to know more about it, I can always send you a link, but he says there's these three elements to our motion. So let's talk about the last piece of this, and that is, well, we need to become aware of what's happening in a conversation, a dialogue. And this is where the term mirroring comes in. Some people are really, really keen and cunning almost in the way they know how to be conscious of people's body movements and match them in a dialogue or in a conversation. They also might be aware of how their choices are affecting the other person's mood or other things. And so they might use this in kind of more manipulative, I don't know if that's the right word. It's definitely a word, uh, a more conscious way of tracking themselves with the other in order to move towards a certain outcome or goal. Uh, yeah, let's call it manipulative. Some people are very good at it. But I think there are positive applications for that. For example, psychologists or counselors who work with trauma victims, uh, are very, very good at, and they're trained they have go through very intense training to become body conscious, um, facial expression conscious, and to make sure that they are not mirroring the trauma back to the person who's trying to move through the experience of unraveling their them that trauma, but they know how to regulate and keep a certain level of calmness so to help that person. So that would be one way that someone who's really conscious of mirroring is using their superpowers for good and not for evil. with with all these powers I'm sharing with you, there is great responsibility that comes with them. Okay. uh So we mirror all sorts of things. Let's just be clear. We mirror linguistically. Uh, we mirror our facial expressions, as Paul Ekman talks about in his research. We and So those things are really important. We're doing mirroring on all different kinds of levels, and that's part of that coordinated management of meaning, whether we're converging or diverging. If someone is not mirroring in an interaction where they're really asymmetrical to the interaction, that is going to be a signal that something might be going on with that person. Maybe they don't feel safe. Maybe they are experiencing a flooding of emotion of some type, or they're distracted in some way by something. they they will their divergence might be a clue that something else is going on, and it would be good to perception check on that. Don't just label and say, hey, I learned in my nonverbal class that your inability to synchronize with me on this conversations means that uh, you're in trouble somehow. You never want to tell someone what they're experiencing. You want a perception check and ask, is everything okay? I noticed this, and is something going on that I need to be aware of? Uh, and that's all. And and then believe the person when they tell you, of course. Always believe them. Don't push too much, because we really don't know what's going on. And leave room and breath, breadth, uh, leave some space. Okay. So, but most of the time when we are really attentive to the other and we are starting to do this mirroring back and forth, it usually signals trust, social connection, belonging. It also is really valuable to know when you're trying to do self-disclosure. We will end up doing unconsciously more self-disclosure when we feel like we are synchronized with the other person. And that's why this is a very powerful super tool to understand. I also want to become aware, like my parents out there, being a parent is so difficult. I've been there. I'm there. Parenting, so difficult. But with babies and with really young children, we need to think of how they are looking to the adults in their life to synchronize and learn. And if we have parents who are constantly distracted by electronics and they don't have the ability to move into synchronization with their kids, uh, kids, we notice over time, will become less and less, they become despondent, they become less and less interactive. Uh, they can actually kind of shut down a little into themselves. And we want to become aware of taking those cues from our kids, that of even when it seems like they're not really communicating with us, they are trying to synchronize with us. So if you have a parent who's doom scrolling, and they're showing, and they're showing these fear, the way some media is really amplifying our fear, and we're sitting with a baby, that baby is going to start synchronizing with us. And these are really deep responsibilities and become really difficult to uh, manage with all the other things you have to manage. Like, I know that's really hard, but become aware of that as one of the implications for this, for our nonverbal interpersonal communication, how important it is to not always be having electronic devices always a part of all our interactions, especially around very, very small children. We want to be careful. Okay, let's see. So we've talked about kinesics in public spaces. We talked about convergence and mirroring in interpersonal conversations. And now I guess there's not actually, that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. I told you my obsession with zombie movies. I'd love to hear any examples you have. I bet I've seen it and would love to hear even more examples. And we talked about some of the researchers who, there's quite a few, I didn't mention all of them, but there's quite a few people who just study this element. That's something I should end with, that all of these things we're discussing, they're like people's careers. Like when I say kinesics, there's some people who dedicate their whole career to just kinesics. And here we are in a college level class on nonverbal, and we cover kinesics in 1 week, right? Like, and yet the topic is this big. So there's no way for me to cover everything, but I do want you to have a general awareness and think about ways that you can be more body aware and environment aware and othered aware of how that is impacting your own well-being, your mental health, and your feeling of security and safety. So those are the things that I wanted to discuss. That's it for today. Bye, everyone. I'll see you next week.